Good evening, City of Cleveland. I want to first be there to thank you all for coming to Ward 5. My colleagues and I, we are working on something different. We also want to make sure people understand what's in your wallet and the things that happen when it comes to the budget for the City of Cleveland. Oftentimes, this last 2 years, being on council, I've heard people say, what y'all doing with this budget? We hear about this billion-dollar budget, but we want to make sure we bring it to our neighbors, bring it to the residents in the community so they can be able to understand what's in your wallet and how Cleveland's residents budget feedback session, which we're presented by Cleveland City Council. So thank you for being here today. I'm gonna start it off and a couple of my colleagues is going to present and we're gonna go from there. First, we're going to do a welcome and an overview of what the budget looks like. And that is something that people need to understand. The first beginning of February and throughout the duration of February, it's really an important time for us to understand the budget and from the budget standpoint from each department and how it gets funded and funding gets into the community. So I'm going to do this welcome and overview. Council wants to hear from you. Cleveland City Council oversees the city's $1.65 billion. When that dollars are spent, whether it's taxpayer dollars, it has to go through a legislative process. And something that I always tell folks, almost 90% of the things that the administration, which is Mayor Bibbs' office and his different departments wants to do, they need that legislative authority. So that $1.65 billion budget is something council oversees. And we also want to make sure that you respond to us so we can be able to give you feedback on how your tax dollars are budgeted and how it is spent. How the city budget gets approved. First, you got to think about the operations and the hearings. You got to think about the budget estimate. You got to think about the budget hearings. Then you got to think about reconciliation. And then you got to think about the approval process. So when you think of the operation hearings, those first things are council receives updates from the services from the city department. Council states its expectation and the goals for the budget coming up on a cycle. So when you see us on YouTube, TV 20, and you hear us having those tables, those are opportunities for us to be able to talk to a department for them to understand what is going on. Then you look at a budget estimate. February 1st is when the mayor comes and gives his budget estimate to Cleveland City Council. And through that process, we are able to see what the mayor's recommendations is as far as the budget, what it takes for him to run the city and for him to do the things that he needs to do. Then that budget becomes the council budget, and it's up to us to be able to hold these weeks of hearings where we talk to the departments, figure out what they need. Some departments may give you a little bit of things they need, but we're able to sit with them and say, no, we think you may need more support in this category, and that's the opportunity for us to figure out what we want to do as a council. Then during a reconciliation, council modifies the budget. That's when we can add money, take money away, do different modifications that needs to happen as we set what is more prioritized based on some of the things that we've heard from residents, constituents, and just different things that we know from just working on council. Then we have to do a council vote on a final draft of the budget. Things to remember. Budget must be balanced. Budget must be balanced. Budget must be passed by April 1st. That is something that people don't often understand. So that February 1st is a real aggressive, hard 2 months because we have to have the budget passed by April 1st. If that budget is not passed by April 1st, downstate in Columbus will then take our budget and they decide for us what they think the budget should be. And that is something you never want to happen because they are not experiencing some of the challenges we have and they don't understand what happened. The budget has different parts from the general fund, which equals routine city services, which is municipal services, garbage, trash, different things like that. But then you have the enterprise fund. The enterprise fund is a little bit different because during that enterprise fund, you're not able to really move money around because those are things that need to be in place in order for us to make everything great. So the water department, the airport, things like that, you're not touching the lights. You can't make the judgment on that. Those things that have to get paid. Then you have this community development block grant, which is a separate piece of legislation that goes through a whole rigorous process as well. One more thing I want you to understand. Mayor recommends, council approves. It's not council recommends, and mayor approves. It goes in that way. So once the mayor recommends this budget and with that estimate, now it's up to council to do the modifications, figure out what needs to happen, and approve the budget to make sure it see fit. The final budget is the people's budget approved by their 17 elected representatives, which is my colleagues, as well as everyone else on council. Right here, we have this final slide that I'm going to allow my colleague, Councilman Charlie Slipe, to be able to present the summary of the proposed 2024 general fund. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So my name is Councilman Slife. I represent Ward 17 on the west side. And so before we get into it, we're going to focus most of the conversation specifically on the general funds. Now, so the reminder is that Councilman Starr mentioned that there's the enterprise funds, there's that $1.65 billion number from the beginning. If you start to add on different grant dollars we get, that number actually starts to increase. But the reason we're focusing on the general fund is that the general fund is the most flexible dollars. So, for example, we get money from the federal government to do housing repair programs. We can't take that money away from a housing repair program and give it to public safety because the federal government doesn't allow us to do that with the dollars. We can't take money out of what you pay in your water bill. We can't take that out of the water department and use that money to pave streets because it's restricted only to use within the Department of Public Utilities. However, the general fund is where that flexibility exists and where we're able to say, okay, with this dollar, do we want to put it towards this department, this program, or somewhere else in the budget? That's where the flexibility is. So if you think of the general fund, the easiest way to describe it is that it's the city's checking account and it's how we pay for most of the city services. The services you're calling your council members about are more often than not paid for out of the general fund. Street resurfacing, public safety, police, EMS, fire, aging programs. And as you can see from this chart, we are bringing in to this budget $46.3 million that was unspent last year. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of money, but that's not even 1 month of what it takes to operate the general fund. This is a big city. And what the mayor's side of City Hall is saying is that we're estimating new revenues this year of about $779 million. So when you take it all together, we have $825.6 million that we're thinking we're going to be able to play with this year. And the expenses that the mayor has proposed is $778.7 million. So still looking to carry money from this year to next year. So there's a little flexibility on the council side. Theoretically, we could take that entire end of year balance, put it into the budget and supplement some other stuff. But that might not be prudent because we might run out of money if there's some kind of emergency or there's a budgetary expense that we can't anticipate right now. So what I'm going to do is just talk about our estimated revenues and then what is being proposed for uses. So the city of Cleveland gets its tax revenue for the general fund from a variety of places, but the lion's share of it, 63.2%, is from income tax. That's the 2.5% that everybody pays if they work in the city of Cleveland. Whether you live in Cleveland or whether you live in a suburban area, if you work in Cleveland, you pay 2.5% of your income. Property tax is about 6%. Most of your property tax actually goes to CMSD. It also gets broken between the county, RTA, other sources. That 6% is actually about $46 million total. And then they start to get smaller, but they add up. Charges for service. The local government fund is money we get from the state of Ohio. That used to be a much bigger chunk. However, the state has decreased the local government fund, all the way down to things like you have to get a license or a permit, or if you're going to a sporting event downtown, you pay an admission tax. All of that adds together to create those hundreds of millions of dollars that I talked about just a second ago. So the next couple slides, I just want to quickly break down the proposed uses. This is all, and again, this is all proposed right now. Again, as Councilman Starr said, the mayor makes a recommendation. He delivers to the council on February 1st an estimated budget. But it's just an estimate. The final budget is the one that's passed by City Council, which is why your feedback's important. As you're looking at these slides and seeing how the budget is proposed to be broken down, how different departments are getting slices of the pie, we want to hear what you want City Hall to accomplish so we can try to take all of this input and make this budget the best budget that it can be. So The quick way, if you remember from school, there's 3 branches of government. The executive branch is most city workers. That takes up, almost 93% of the total budget. We also have to fund the muni court, housing court, just the other judges and their courts, which is about 6.2%. And then council, there's 17 of us. We have a staff. We comprise the smallest part of the total city budget. We're about 1.2%. So we hope that you feel that you're getting a lot of bang for the buck. But to break that down further, and this I know starts to get sloppy, but the main takeaway from this slide is that slightly over half of the budget is allocated towards public safety. So that's police, fire, EMS, animal control, also some costs associated with the consent decree. From there, the next largest section is public works. So that's recreation, that's street resurfacing and pothole patching, that is waste collection, among other things. I will say most of the calls that I get in my office, I can't speak for the other 16, are really within public safety and public works, so it makes sense that they comprise such a large portion of the budget. The non-departmental is an interesting thing that I know we'll be exploring because essentially these are costs that can't be attributed to one specific department. Some of them are even the general fund having to subsidize some of those enterprise funds, so an enterprise fund is in theory self-sufficient, but not all of them are. So we're going to be asking a lot of questions about that during our budget hearings. And then as you can see, it goes down municipal court. General government is the mayor's office plus the Office of Capital Projects, all of the different commissions like the Planning Commission, the Community Police Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Landmarks Commission. All of those fall within this broad general government. The Department of Finance, Department of Law, Department of Building and Housing and Public Health. And then you'll see there's a couple small slivers that didn't get a label just because they're so small. The program was fighting with me. But just for reference, those are things like the Department of Economic Development, the Department of Aging, the Department of Community Development too. But I think it's worth mentioning that the only part of community development that comes from the general fund is the director's office. Most of the programs, the housing programs that you see in the community, support for community development corporations, that comes from the block grant legislation, which is separate from this budget. So that's why I don't want anyone to think that we're not spending money in community development. We're just not necessarily doing it out of the general fund. And then just another way to look at it, since public safety is so large, we thought it'd be useful to break down public safety further. So you can see about 30% of the budget is police, about 14.5% is fire, and then further around the corner, EMS at under 5%, just to kind of let you see how, since public safety is such a large portion of the budget, how each of those divisions stacks up against all the other departments. And I think with that, I'm going to kick it over to my colleague from Ward 7, Councilman Stephanie House-Jones.
All right, thank you. And now we are going to the end of this conversation. So one of the things, when you look at our budget, you see all of these numbers. And one thing we really wanted to highlight is that when we think about the services in the city of Cleveland, there are people behind the work that goes into this. When you take a breakdown, first up, we talk about the legislative branch. That's where Cleveland City Council is. In this proposed budget, it is 61 people, right? That is the legislative branch, and that is what is being proposed. In the judicial branch, again, that is made up of the municipal court, clerk of courts, as well as housing courts. This is approximately 426 people. Okay, and then executive branch, Councilman Slav and as well as Councilman Starr kind of went through all the different departments and divisions. In the executive branch, this budget proposes 4,113 people. Put all of that together, that for the operating budget, the general funds, that's 4,600 people to the tune of $562.5 million. I'll say that again, $562.5 million out of our general operating fund, which really accounts for 72% of the budget, right? So as we are going out to the community to get feedback, as we are taking suggestions of, well, this department needs to get more money or this department needs to lose money, understand if you add something, you got to take money away from somewhere, right? If you decrease money, you got to put some money somewhere, because we talked about our statutory requirement to ensure that there is a balanced budget. So it's not just that simple of adding more money. It has to come from somewhere. And so as we are getting people's feedback and suggestions, we really want to hear back from you to understand, if we increase in one area, where would the money come from? And understand that means there will be cuts that will be coming from a specific department or division or branch of government, which will mean that there will be some changes in the implementation and the actions that we can or cannot do. As we transition into getting the feedback from people, we also know that there are people who have not been had the opportunity to directly ask us questions, or you might not feel comfortable and live in the audience to ask your questions or give your suggestions. We want to offer to you that you also can provide us feedback through a line that was established from Cleveland City Council, as well as an email. If you're interested in giving your feedback, we encourage you to call the Cleveland City Council budget line. You can reach us at 216-714-3006. Again, that number is 216-714-3006. When you call that number, please leave a message, and we will take all of your information on things that we should consider as we go into budget sessions. Separately, if you want to send an email giving us your budget suggestions of things that you would like to see happen in the general operating budget, we would encourage you to email us at webmaster@clevelandcitycouncil.org. Again, that's webmaster@clevelandcitycouncil.org. So we will get into just the closing comments. As you think, we have now, yes, it's absolutely less than 60 days. Coming up beginning February 20th. Yes, the mayor, he put the estimate in a paper form. We will, on February 20th, we will have a direct conversation with the mayor for him to give his reasoning for his estimate and providing the thoughts behind his mayor's estimate. From there, Cleveland City Council will then engage in 2 weeks of dialogue with the various departments and directors to ask some specific feedback and getting suggestions. So again, we really would like people to give us their commentary so we can engage in that conversation. Okay? So now, we want to thank everybody for their time. Looking forward to having a good budget season and understanding that this is our opportunity to be your voice at City Hall. That is what we're here for. That's what we want to do. So please join us as we engage in the 2024 City of Cleveland budget.